Sorry, I'm
Oh,
starting the recording because you're saying some fun things.
Recorded, so I better not say what I was planning on saying.
Big Brother is listening, but
Well,
only for educational purposes.
Now it's gonna. I mean, you know, if you're following news, then a wrong word on the recording could do a lot of damage, right?
Hey, Peter.
Hey.
I'm back now.
It's good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, Peter.
I know, it's crazy. Last time I saw you was what, like 20 years ago?
I was just thinking about that. I think I graduated 2000. Yeah, year 2000.
It literally is 20 years. Oh my God.
You haven't changed.
Oh, stop it. On the inside, I'm rotting.
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Listen, we're all screaming on the inside.
I know, exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. Were you talking about the Japanese roller coaster?
Of course.
Yeah,
I'm always
just
talking about the Japanese
sure.
roller coaster. All right. Well, it looks like it's slowed down in terms of the participants that are joining. And since it is about 12:03, I want to go ahead and get everything going so you can cram in as much good stuff for us as possible.
Well, we'll see how the timing of this works out. You know, I was trying to be mindful of the 45 minutes and leave some time for conversation. But I guess what I would like to say is that if somebody has any questions, or is there something that you want me to stop and talk a little bit more about, I guess the best way to do it would be to just say it with a voice. I'm not sure if I'll be monitoring the chat while talking, so and I'm totally fine with that. I'd much rather talk about things that you might want to hear about than just whatever I thought might be interesting to talk about. So I should begin the proper portion of this.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and give you a brief intro, just for those that might be unfamiliar. Today we have Piotr Szyhalski with us. He is a professor at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. He's a Polish-born, US-based multimedia artist, and has in the past decade established the Labor Camp, which is an ongoing art project that includes interactive components, both digital and physical, original music, performances, videos, printed ephemera, text, and a blog, as well as an archive of online resources. His work moves between fine arts, painting, photography, drawing, installation, sound, media, art, and design, and everything. His multi-layered works often explore communication, exchange, extreme historical phenomena, and relationships between the individual and society. It also touches on history and time. His work has been exhibited worldwide at such venues as the International Center of Photography, the New York Expo Film Festival, Instagraph, the ISEA in Paris, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, the San Jose Museum of Art, and the Experimenta Design in Lisbon, Portugal, and has also been featured in a variety of catalogs and publications. I believe Noriko and I were talking about the book that you were printing, so maybe at some point you can mention that. We still got them joining. You're very popular.
There are actually two books coming out. There's the book of the COVID reports that will be coming out this winter. And then there's a book that's coming out in conjunction with the exhibition at the Weizmann Art Center. That's more like a overview of the work. So I don't know. Books are coming.
Books are coming. All right, so we will definitely, you'll have to let us know when those are coming out and how we can sort of access that. But yeah, without further ado, everybody please welcome Piotr Szyhalski.
Thank you so much. Let's see, so I should screen share
here.
Yeah. All right, let's do okay, so is this now full screen for you?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I am seeing the chat window, but I think I'm going to turn it off just so that I don't get distracted. And really, if anybody wants to ask any questions, just voice it. That would be the best. So first of all, obviously, just thank you for having me, and Noriko, thank you for reaching out. It was just great to hear from you, and I'm really excited to connect this way. So very cool. Let's see, how do I go ahead? All right, very good. So I guess I wasn't sure exactly if the focus of the conversation or the talk was going to be the current project that is still unfolding, the COVID-19 labor camp report series, or a kind of a broader view of the work. And I guess Noriko suggested it should be both. So I'm going to go really quickly with through some older work, simply to say I do have a very diverse practice. And by the way, that bio, oh my God, I gotta get a different bio out there because it's just a little crazy. That's like everything. Anyway, so very quickly through some diverse practice, and I'm just gonna kind of go through this fast. So in the 90s, for example, I spent about a decade of my time working exclusively for the screen. So exploring interactive media, the Spleen, the Canon series. I got a chance to work for Bjork, for Smashing Pumpkins. I was doing this professionally while teaching. Got this first interactive artwork commission from the Walker Art Center, which was kind of amazing. So exclusively screen-based work. Things like this. This is a small interactive piece that is modeled after the big audience stadium displays that you might see in North Korean stadiums with big graphics being presented by multiple people holding little color cards. In this case, as a user, you get to design your own compositions that are saved and then replayed on loop in the gallery setting. So lots of interactions, and my interest in kind of connecting with the audience in that way was definitely something that set the tone for a lot of work that came afterwards. I work with sound, I write sound software, I create these physical interfaces for gallery and physical experience of sound. I released 2 CDs. That got me interested in event as a medium. So there's a big part of my practice that focuses around live events. This is a shot from, I love this image. This is a kind of a empty version of the famous Iwo Jima photograph from an Empty Words performance based on John Cage's famous lecture. This is a little more recent. This is a piece called Geophone, where on the left you can see the series of spotlights. Each highlights a portion of this lawn where I buried speakers in the ground. So you actually have to lay down to listen to the sound material coming straight from the earth. I kind of love that idea. This is the first project in what I'm hoping to be a sort of a longer running series with different content being presented in this unusual fashion. I also work on installations, so working with spaces, indoor, outdoor spaces. This is Elemental from Houston. This is at Alma, 2 sides of the same wall, a table with the hole drilled, hole through the wall, a rope holding all these chairs, and it's just gravity that is supporting these objects on the wall with some hand-painted material on the surface of the table. More installations, which often involve objects, and objects are of interest to me. So in the other one, you just saw these records. I designed these labels for the old Edison record series. This is a Google shovel set. These are hybrid instruments that I developed that are called labor camp orchestra instruments. So bells connected with hand labor tools, or these small paper sculptures that were then photographed as tintypes, becoming objects in that way. And then the most recent object series is this series of plates. I'm I'm not sure exactly how this came about. I was very excited about this this project. It sort of reconnected me with very manual and type-oriented process. So I collect some plates from, you know, secondhand stores, vintage plates, and just add this the same phrase: "You work, you eat," on each one of them. It's a series that are each plate is named after a subsequent letter of the alphabet. So there's 26 of those in the series. And this is actually the most recent work that I've done before starting the COVID series. So it's like, I would say, I mean, I'm not sure if there's any way this led to the COVID reports. I think there's an element of the focus on typography that perhaps suggested the way I ended up approaching the reports, and also the fact that I actually spend a good amount of time painting these by hand. So spending time with the brush in my hand was definitely a preparation of sorts for the project. So the plates. Now let me just go back a little bit and talk about a few larger pieces, a couple of larger pieces, and partly because I want to highlight a couple of specific relationships with audience that emerge in those pieces. This is from an exhibition at the Soap Factory here in Minneapolis, entitled Three Factory Pieces. This is one of the three big rooms that had different, very different sort of material presented. This is the last room of the exhibition, and a kind of a quietest space in that environment. So these shovels are kind of a counterpart to these brand new Google shovels that I showed you earlier. These are some collected old shovels that I was accumulating over the years. I built these custom coffins for each one of those shovels, so you can see the different proportions that are built specifically for these objects. All of them are distributed in that space, the floor of which I covered with the tar paper, and then distributed something to the tune of 400 pounds of salt, and then hand lettered the text in that material using this, this spatula. Part of the idea was that as the audience explores the exhibition over the time of its run, the text gets to be slowly erased with the audience's feet. So you have a little before and after image where the salt just sort of shifts freely through the space. And I love the very gentle, kind of soft, underhanded interaction that was part of that dynamic. A different example is the project called Permanent Labor, a big all-night event as part of the Northern Lights, Northern Spark all-night festival. So it's a work that lasts for 9 hours. I always loved it. I've done a number of these, and I always love the challenge of trying to develop something that sustains that crazy duration, not to mention that it lasts entire night. So it starts in the evening one day and it ends in the morning of the next. And I'm bringing this up because there are a number of ways for the audience to interact. I also wrote this crazy visual score for these ad hoc vocal performances by the audience. I'm not sure how much time we'll have to listen to it, but there are multiple stations in the piece where people engage with the material in different ways. Lots of shovels involved. There was drumming that was sustained for the 9 hours. There was a set of percussionists that was booked for different shifts throughout the performance. And it's called Permanent Labor because it explores different forms of labor that are happening. So from very physical labor with 12 tons of dirt deposited by the trucks in the very beginning of the performance. You can see that here. To the reading room in which people were able to read the, I'm going to skip the sound because you probably won't be able to hear me, read the text by Lazzarato called Immaterial Labor. So the spectrum of working in a physical world versus working internally, intellectually, and everything in between. And part of that event was also printing of these posters. We're working all the time posters, which are kind of a staple in, throughout my work. I still work on new versions of this poster. There are multiple editions out there. They're typically associated with those live events. But I'm bringing this particular project up because it does sort of mark, and I wanted to underscore my sustained interest in printed matter. This is something that has always been part of my practice, no matter whether I was working on sound or objects, installations, events, whatever. Printed matter is always there, one way or the other. And poster format is something very close to my heart. This was part of my education. I have a degree in poster design specifically from a school back in Poland. So poster is something that exists through my work, no matter what sort of like focal points for my media practice may be. So this is a slightly different version of the "we're working all the time" message that is sort of explored over 4 pieces that are meant to be seen together, so that the continuity of the clouds and the type message on the bottom is there. But you can also take them apart and kind of enjoy them individually. And I included this in the presentation because there are definitely signals of that aesthetic or the visual language that I end up using very much in the current work in the COVID series. This is the most recent one of the additions from the WAWAT posters, and one through this winding banner that connects to the big banner project I'll talk about in just a few minutes. A different version of the poster, massive banner that was developed for the outside of the soap factory. And then the second format that I really love is leaflets. And this is specifically leaflets that are modeled after the format developed by the military and used as essentially as a weapon of war. There's particular size, proportions, type of paper, and obviously the kind of messaging that comes with that format. And I've been designing leaflets pretty much my entire kind of creative practice, I would say. So there's just a few samples from the Politprop class, the class that I used to teach on propaganda. Again, leaflets, like posters, often are associated with particular events, but sometimes become works of their own, like this series of leaflets that is based on the coalition forces leaflet that was distributed in Iraq during the more recent war, that just had on one side the dinar note with Saddam Hussein's face, and on the other, on the back, it would say, "Honor will never be regained, no matter what the cost is." And what I ended up doing was something very simple. I just made a translation of that text and an equivalent of American currency to that. So there were these two kind of competing currencies and contexts, but I've done a number of those leaflets that address the Iraq war, considering or acknowledging the fact that what was happening in America at the time was also part of that conflict, a kind of a home front, if you will. Something that I'm yet to do, I never got a chance to do, is to do a proper airplane drop of leaflets. There was one festival in San Jose some years ago where we actually agreed to do this, and I printed thousands of leaflets for this event, and only to find out that the organizers sort of backed out of this plan just a few weeks before that. So instead, I ended up building these boxes. They're, I call them message force multipliers, because that was the euphemism used at the time for these retired US Army generals who would show up in the media to talk about why the war was important, why we were doing what we were doing. And so they were just actually deployed by the Pentagon as quote unquote message force multipliers. So I thought that these machines that I ended up making for distributing leaflets that were my designs were my message force multipliers. There's a little video just to show you how these ended up working. So these churn out these leaflets very, very slowly. Every, I think 2 to 3 minutes, one of them will come out from the machine. So this was the sort of second best to the aerial drop from the airplanes. These were displayed in several different locations in San Jose through the city. I built a bunch of these boxes, and then sometimes they're presented in the outdoor environment, sometimes in the indoor environment. I'm not sure if I have any pictures of the, all right. So from leaflets, I'm going to go back for a moment to the leaflets, which are probably the smallest size printed matter that I'm interested in. I'm going to go into the discussing probably the largest printed matter that I ended up working with recently, and that's the project that I called Them. It's a project that was conceived as a kind of reaction to the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations and the way that people were sort of brutalized by police, while the Wall Street occupants were sipping champagne and sort of laughing at what was happening on the street. I found it very disturbing, to say the least, and ended up writing these angry notes that were one way or the other addressing the economic inequities in our country. And some years later, when the Soap Factory exhibition presented itself, I decided to use one of the rooms in the space to present these messages. So I ended up printing these largest probably printed matter pieces to date. They're about 12 feet tall and 42 feet long, so really substantial presence. And this is the first room in the Soap Factory as you enter it. So you get sort of exposed to this very loud kind of punch in the nose message. The piece with the salt and the coffins is the last room in that exhibition. So I often think of them as a kind of contradictory experiences. One that screams really loudly, the other one that perhaps whispers in a much more poetic way. I'm interested in that range of tone and voice and how we as artists can make our voices present in the cultural landscape. So part of this exhibition was that I also, in order to execute these pieces, ended up using this crazy material, the roll of probably thousands of yards of this material that somehow inexplicably landed in my hands. And I built this printer contraption to execute these massive pieces. But I also decided, since the issue of labor is such a big part of my work, to set up that workshop right in the middle of the gallery space with the implied notion that subsequent printings will be happening in that space. I was thinking that I would end up perhaps printing various messages from that text that I wrote and add them to the wall presentation. This is just a few images of the project presented in different scenarios, in different spaces, different cities. You can see on the lower left-hand corner, the machine kind of evolved a little bit. This version that you see on the left from Seattle is now as a steel scaffold, as opposed to wooden scaffold that the earlier versions had. Is fully mobile. The platform on which I'm printing actually encloses the printer as a crate, so it's fully shippable, forklift friendly, could go any place. I'm super excited about that. And part of the reason for this is that I do find this project very much an event. It's a wonderful balance, for me anyway, of both installation, printed matter, and event. And each time I present this work, I print this text that you see on the left. Those are the messages that I wrote after the Occupy Wall Street, for a number of days subsequently. When I'm done with this, we cut it off, and there's an event where a kind of a local community or volunteers and myself walk the message out into the public space. That connection between the inside and the outside of the gallery space is really important to me, and something that I guess I'm hoping you can see from the number of works, that there's this always questioning of where the work belongs. How does it activate the space? How does the given space relate to the messages? Trying to be not only aware, but mindful of kind of new layers of meaning that emerge from that connection or the friction between the work and the context in which it's being experienced. So here's a couple of photographs and short videos of these banners during the walkabouts. I call them walkabouts. I guess this one is really good for the sense of scale. You can see it sort of walking down the street. And maybe the best video that articulates the idea that for me, this in this iteration of the work, the text becomes a cross between a protest banner and a news sticker. You know, the line of text that just sort of slowly moves on the bottom of the screen. Part of it was for me that today, it seems in the last few months certainly confirmed that the distance from the moment where you see something on the news versus when it becomes the content for us to protest on the street has gotten so small, and we move so quickly from one place to another, that in this work I was trying to compress these formats into a one sort of experience. So there's an aspect to this project that I want to talk about for a few minutes that is really fascinating to me. So the day after the exhibition opened at the Soap Factory, Jamar Clark was murdered in Minneapolis, and I was reading the news about this literally the very next day after the opening. I was sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee, reading the news, and I thought, I actually do have this crazy printing contraption set up in the gallery. So I posted the message you see on the left, and then, you know, people started sending some suggestions. I went to the Soap Factory and spent basically the entire day printing whatever people wanted me to print. So the project sort of became a kind of a amplifier or a mouthpiece or a way of funneling the messages from the social media sphere and into the streets. And I said, you know, that people can come to the factory to pick those banners up anytime. And we just continued printing whatever that particular feed on Facebook was suggesting. And then we started seeing these images, people posting the banners now on the streets, popping out either on the Facebook feed or somewhere else in the social media. So what was fascinating about that is that I very quickly realized that the project was essentially used by the audience, you know, in a way that I perhaps couldn't have conceived initially, but was, in my mind anyway, really beautiful, and perhaps the reason actually why I ended up making the project in the first place. So this work has this kind of dual practice. I still execute the them project with my own text, and we do the walkabout, but at the same time I continue to receive requests from people all over the country for these banners, and I print them as I receive those requests. And the banners have now made appearances in many different contexts, many demonstrations for a plethora of reasons. I sometimes simply ship them to people. Other times, and this is my favorite scenario, I ask people to come and print with me. And so there's a kind of a micro community that emerges from the inside of the work, so to speak. And those are the moments that for me are perhaps carrying the most value in the entire process. And once again, I really do think that it may very well be that this is the reason why the project was meant to exist in the first place. I love those situations, those moments, instances where the audience simply takes ownership of the work. Whether it happens internally, the idea of passing on the physical piece of goods to another human being, or like it happened with the banner printer project that now is a kind of a community service device, I would say, or whether it's one of those screen-based projects that I mentioned briefly in the very beginning of the lecture, this spleen online installation that I ended up building that subsequently was simply taken over by people with actual medical spleen problems. You know, they used the forum within my work as a way of communicating with each other about their medical issues. And I honestly think about those moments as some of the most valuable experiences. And moments where this idea of relationship between the artist, the artwork, the audience, and how all of that is wrapped within a sense of some sort of social responsibility or a cultural those are the moments that I always look out for. So I'm going to talk about the COVID reports now because, like I said, the plates were the very, very last thing I did before the COVID reports, but the banners are kind of like the big project that continues on. And right now the printer is stuck in Philadelphia after an exhibition and the lockdown. So I couldn't necessarily work on these particular pieces these days, but that absence of other opportunities or other tasks was really something that led to this project. In the very beginning of the quarantine or the lockdown here in Minneapolis, just out of sheer frustration, I would say, I simply started producing the, I just went to the basement, sat down at the desk and made a drawing, which I then asked my daughter to hold it. We posted a picture on Instagram and Facebook. And some interesting conversations happened around that drawing that very first day. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe I should do another one about slightly different subject matter, and we'll see what happens. And so these are all drawn with the brush and ink, not necessarily printed pieces, even though they look like printed matter, but obviously the same aesthetic or the same or very similar sensibilities that are that you might have seen in other previous projects are playing out here in many ways. So this is the first and the second drawing that I've done. So I posted the second one. You know, my daughter is holding them on our porch for the photograph. And I just kept doing those because I just couldn't get enough of the conversations that were blossoming around these drawings. And I wasn't sure how many of those I will end up making. I was looking nervously at the very small amount of paper that I had in the basement, 7 sheets to be exact. And I thought, okay, maybe I should use all the 7. And when I was reaching that end of that sequence, somebody was already offering online that they can send me paper. So I just keep making the drawings. I found more, some extra stash, so I kept doing this. Then my art supply store started doing curbside pickup, and so the excuse of running out of materials was no longer there. And then as the project continued, I'm just going to go fairly quickly through these and maybe talk about some themes a little later. As the project grew, I realized that there was something similar that was happening with it as happened with the spleen, as happened with the banners, and that I really began to feel that I was no longer doing this because, you know, I had an idea or I wanted to do this particular artwork, that I was really doing a kind of community service, if you will, for folks who are reaching out to me and sharing sometimes very intimate, kind of private reasons for which they check with those drawings daily. And so a sense of a kind of a community again emerged around these drawings that became kind of larger for me anyway, larger than the whatever my own agenda might have been in the first place. So I'm still making these drawings. I think at this point I am past 170 some of these pieces. I joke that it had become a kind of a lifestyle at this point because I literally have to plan my rest of my life around the task. I believe that there's still reasons for me to keep making these. And I think about this in numerous ways, but I've always been interested in history, and a lot of my work touches on historical issues. This concept of extreme historical phenomena as these important events that are happening somewhere in the timeline, and then they propagate through time and continue to have effects on us later on is very important to me. We're talking on September 11th today, and this is one of those examples. September 11th is an extreme historical phenomenon, and we know very well how that idea propagated through time and still with us today. In many ways, you could say that there was a pivotal moment in American history when September 11 happened, and the changes, the impact of that moment are felt to this day, I would say. So I've always been interested in these things. I've done a massive project about war in Iraq called the Theater of Operations. And it was the first project where I was sort of responding to what I thought was an extreme historical phenomenon, but in so-called real time as it was happening. I ended up scouring YouTube for helmet cam videos, the videos of the soldiers were posting themselves, a kind of a counter narrative to what you could see in the media, and ended up building this whole piece that revolved around a group, a community, my family, friends, co-workers, reenacting these dialogues. So the Theater of Operation was called the first sonic reenactment of Iraqi freedom operation. Anyway, back to the COVID. I feel like I am also responding to extreme historical phenomena in real time. We're very much still within the bowels of that event, and it mutates, it changes. This particular drawing happened as the George Floyd murder had taken place in Minneapolis, and so inevitably, I realized the kind of overlap of these issues. And the more I work on this project, the more I realize the intersections of the ideas that connect the pandemic to the economic inequities, to the police brutality, to the environmental issues. All of these things are very densely interconnected, if you will. And I was, as I was working on this project, the conversations about when to end it, how to end it, are a big part of it. And I thought I always said I was going to look for a sign or that will tell me that I should stop with the project. And somebody told me recently that even if pandemic somehow ends, because the project now absorbed all these other issues or sort of acknowledged the extent of those interconnectedness platforms, I will never be able to really stop working on this project. And it's probably true to an extent, in the same way that I feel like I will never stop working on or producing work that is somehow not part of the labor camp framework for me. They all kind of connect in some ways to this set of issues that come back or resurface in the work in different ways. So anyway, there is just this is just some sampling from the series. If you really want to see the series, you should be looking at it on Instagram, because that's where the entirety of it lives at this point, or Facebook. But Instagram is better, I think, because it's just that content, if you were to look at Labor Camp on Instagram. So here's a couple of ways that people also encountered this project. As I was developing the subsequent drawings every day, I also started considering shifting the experience of that project outside of the virtual space. So again, the same theme of trying to think about how the context changes the work, how the work changes the context. Poster, like I said, is one of my formative experiences as a visual artist. So the idea of art functioning in a public space is always very important to me. And I often looked at the internet, at least in the early days, as a kind of a public space. And I think both of those notions sort of collapsed in this current project. So this is from Rochester Art Center, where the work is just wheat pasted on the walls of the gallery. So very much underscoring the ephemeral nature of posters as a format. These are not going to be survive. They're not going to survive. They're going to have to be torn and thrown away. So the inside of the museum. This is from the Minnesota Museum of American Art, which is kind of cool because the museum is still on lockdown, but they decided to exhibit the project by wheat pasting it to the street-facing windows of the closed museum. I love that idea. I love the fact that the work occupies this skin, if you will, the edge between the public space and the institutional art space. And then there is the first sort of full-on street presentation of the work in Baltimore, where the first 80 of the series, first 80 drawings were wheat pasted to these electrical boxes. I love the way that allowed the posters, the work to kind of wind all the way back to the street context and kind of give them a chance to reverberate in a different environment. I think the work was very well received in Baltimore, and right now we're organizing similar events in Philadelphia and New York. So let's see, how am I doing on time?
You're doing
5 more
good.
minutes?
Yeah, I could see you probably do five minutes.
All right, so very quickly, I'm going to go through what I would consider some themes in this work. And I really should not talk too much about this, but so a handful of visual themes. So this is the benefit of working on a large series. I can start sort of exploring different themes, different ideas, continuities within the work itself. There is a kind of satisfying element to that. So the few visual themes that I, in retrospect, identified in the work are the homes that you can see. In fact, the one I'm working on today goes back to the home theme. Hands, lots of hands everywhere, and not just hands like this, but also hands like this. And those are always identified by the dollar cufflink. So those are the hands of them, of the regime, in the sort of iconically identified in the series. There's the phones. There's a lot of phones everywhere. Such a huge part of our experience of pandemic and lockdown. So much happened, even with the uprising since the George Floyd murder. For so many of us, things were happening basically in and through the phones. That's why this object carries such a heavy presence in the work. And so do the coffins, as kind of a archetypal image that allows me to, with a little bit of distance, control the subject of death and mortality, a huge theme that is such a profound presence in the experience of pandemic, that massive global experience. And fire, as it makes its appearance in different contexts, also became initially a kind of a metaphorical representation of the pandemic, but then with the uprising became literal city on fire. And now today, California is on fire. And so the drawing I made yesterday brought the element of fire again, but in a totally different context now. So these themes morph in a way that some kind of strange narrative emerges, which is maybe why I love the fact that we're publishing a book of this, so that the posters will be, or the images will be sort of available in a sort of a linear format, right? So the chronology of the band and the kind of journalistic quality of it will be there. So there's also these genres, the genre of the snake oil advertising that somehow was inspired by, the whole deal with the drinking disinfectant or bleach injections. I just thought it was ridiculously similar to these fake cure advertisements. And so I started modeling some of the messaging on that format. There's the genre of the diagrams or imaginary illustrations for publications, like the three-phased approach on the left. That was proposed images, illustrations for this three-phased approach to reopening America. And then there's this old white man kind of grotesque orgy of some kind, where there's always booze and money is flowing and these men do horrible things. And then there's the other issues that sort of emerged or are sort of swallowed by the pandemic context. The money, so very much continuing some of the ideas from the Big Banner Project. The nature or environment, police brutality squarely as an issue, something that we all have to or had to confront yet again through the uprising and on through Black Lives Matter movement. And then lastly, there's a number of straight up propaganda devices or references that are in the work that are connecting to a history of poster design and history of propaganda. The way that the pandemic was framed in the US as a war very quickly on got me thinking about the language of war and politics. And so much of the visual vernacular in those images is informed by these things, but not just the way they look, but also the way they speak. So the fist smashing things, the V, huge tradition of victory poster designs, or the feet stamping out the enemy. The whole genre of the U posters, international theme present in multiple conflicts, the idea of suggesting the silence, or on the right, the kind of classic, especially in the communist countries, stacked profile of portraits, usually sort of communicating some kind of collective zeal. Or like this, a kind of mini series that emerged from the series as they are presented in different moments in time. So this was started by this essential work poster. Then on July 30th, I was responding to the suggestion of postponement of the election, and then the John Lewis Memorial the day following that. I love playing sort of now with the format itself. So the vote, the ballot that is being set on fire here is actually the ballot right here that ended up having the flame extinguished and just has a little bit of damage to it. So there are all these subtle sort of detail threads connecting a number of these pieces. And I think this is where I'm going to stop. This is one of the small vote banners that I ended up doing some, I think last year as part of the banner project. But, we are where we are because of the people that we have put in charge of our country. And the election is coming up very soon. I hope you all will be voting. And I certainly hope that you will be voting, because I can't. I am not a US citizen, even though I've been living here for more than 20 years now. So I'm what is referred to in a lovely fashion as the legal alien, the green card carrying member of the society. I pay taxes. I basically contribute to our society in just about every same way each one of the US citizens does, except for the right to vote. So I'm hoping that you will do that, and that perhaps we can start the process of undoing the damage. And with that, I will just say, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
45 minutes, right?
That was like, yeah, it was like a couple minutes over, but that's a tight 45.
All right.
All right. Well, like he said, he's open to questions. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Peter about any of the...
Did I now stop the screen sharing?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, we're back to just faces now.
I have a question.
Very good, thank you.
My roommate loves Bjork, so I have to ask, what was it like working with or for Bjork?
I love
it. Was a very unusual experience. I was approached by MTV Online. I don't know if you guys know what the MTV is, but I've been doing this screen-based internet based projects that were these sort of small interactive multimedia experiences. And somebody at MTV Online thought that what they wanted to do was the interactive version of music videos, right? So music experiences that the audience can play with in some shape or form. And so they tapped into me to develop some of those. And so I ended up doing one for Bjork, one for Smashing Pumpkins, and one for Busta Rhymes. Yeah, it's awesome. From the streets to the stadiums was the song for Busta Rhymes. And then, believe it or not, this is kind of incredible. Then I was approached by them again to do one for Jay-Z. And the song that I was supposed to work with was called Big Pimpin'. And, and I just said, somebody else should do it. But I did work with Bjork, and that was kind of awesome. We met a couple of times, and she's a strange individual. Although now I'm reminded that this is being recorded, so I should probably be a little more careful. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience, and let's see. The best compliment I've ever received from anybody about my sound work was that as I was showing her some of the work, interactive work on the screen, she actually said, "I love the sound in this." So that was like
high praise from Bjork.
I know, it was amazing.
Nice.
I'm sorry. I don't know what the question was. This was for a song that was from a duet between Bjork and Tom York from the
Radiohead.
Dancer in the Dark music.
Radiohead?
Yeah, the guy from Radiohead. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was awesome. The best paid gig in my entire life.
Right?
Yeah.
So cool.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I really like your posters a lot.
Thank you.
In terms of process, are you just straight up drawing everything by pencil? I mean, your typography, particularly kind of using the propaganda World War II stuff. Are you putting all that stuff in pencil and then just inking it? Are you doing anything else, like laying type under it or anything else?
No, nothing like that. I started with little paper sketches like this. These are from yesterday for the panic drawing. Once I work out an idea that I want to do, I wake up at 5:30 in the morning to get this done. And I do some reading, read a couple of articles, look online, do a couple of sketches. Once I know what I want to do, then I'm starting something today. I just do a pencil sketch on the proper format, and then from there it's just the little brush pen, and that's that. There's really nothing else happening. I kind of think about it as a weird performance thing or something, and it's just
awesome.
one pass of ink.
I love your use of typography. I love the use of the things that are almost got like kind of almost Cyrillic stuff. Like you got your what looks like a backwards 3 for some of your E's, even though you're using a
I love that E.
You're using a sans serif font, but making a script like in the Victory one. That's really cool stuff.
I love playing with the letter forms, and I always say this, that so I ostensibly refer to these as drawings, and I keep saying they're just drawings and not so much poster. I know that they are really posters too. I've printed them, they've been posted on the street, so they function in that way. But first and foremost, I really think about them as just artworks. I sit down and make a drawing using pencil and ink in very traditional form. It just happens so that my drawings sometimes have images in them and sometimes have letters and words, and they say things, but that's just a choice that I made in deciding what kind of form makes its way on that piece of paper. And this is a whole conversation. I don't know if we have time for this, but I have this strange relationship to the concept of political art. I really reject that notion entirely, and I always get really upset when people talk about what I do as political art. And I say, that's such a flat idea. In fact, it seems so doing so much disservice to the work of so many people. When you label something in that way, it's immediately shifted to the margins of what art really is supposed to be. And I was so happy. Last year I was in a conversation with somebody, and I somehow was able to verbalize this in a way that seemed really effective to me. I said to them that I don't do political work, but I do work about politics. And I said that I concern myself with politics the same way a landscape painter concerns themselves with landscape, or a portrait artist concerns themselves with the face. I look at politics, I look at the social landscape that we inhabit, and I make work about it. I reflect it, I respond to it. But since as with every single project, this is why so much of my work has these very different materials, different formats, because I always ask myself a question: what is the particular material? What is the unique medium that is specifically or best suited to this subject matter, right? So this project that I'm in right now is squarely about this massive shared global experience, this extreme historical phenomenon that has been warped and shaped by the kind of all the perversities of the political discourse that frame it. And, you know, so many people died as a result of some kind of misguided agendas, whether it's greed or power, whatever motivates these things. So I asked myself that same question: what is the language that I need to be using to talk about this situation? And it ends up looking the way these drawings look because of that. It ends up looking like posters. It ends up echoing propaganda because that is the language that is best suited to articulate these messages. And so I undermine it, I question it, I draw something that looks like propaganda, but have it say something that entirely isn't, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of, I say it's like a cultural jujitsu. I try to use the enemy's energy. Like, so if I think of the propaganda as the enemy, I want to use it in a way that it ends up working against it.
They're definitely images with an opinion.
For sure.
I found it interesting that you sort of talked about you having to sort of change your whole life to fit around doing this every single day now. I host a reading group every week with some of the Art Forum students, and this week's reading was about preparing rituals, or creating a ritual to sort of prepare yourself for creativity. So I'm interested in this idea. You said, you kind of touched on it. You said that you wake up at 5:30 every morning. It's like, what's the ritual?
It's a great subject. You know, like everybody, I can procrastinate. I can find many reasons not to do the work, but I also have been doing work for many years and know a little bit about myself and know how to trick myself into doing the work. And by that I mean that half the success is really just starting. And I know this. The second I start working on something, then 6 hours later I'll realize, oh my God, you know, it's the middle of the night and I'm still at it. I'm sure you know, all of you know exactly what I'm talking about, because there is a space that you enter and nothing else matters. And really, this is part of this project, and at least it's in the beginning, was for me to enter that space so that I can leave all this other crap behind, right? And somehow stay focused on something that seems constructive and productive. So the ritual, the 5:30 a.m. wake-up call is actually now in place for me because I also teach. I have classes that are 5 hours long in the afternoon, and when the school was about to start, I was just really nervous that the school is just going to kill the project. And for all the discussions about like what kind of sign I would have to see to stop it, it's just going to be something so simple, like I will have no time because my job will keep me away from doing this. And so a couple of weeks before the school started, I started practicing. I started like working out for this by waking up super early and trying to get this done before 1 o'clock in the afternoon when my class starts. And I think I am able to do it. So far so good. But the ritual is just, it's very simple. I mean, like I said, I get a cup of coffee done, sit down with my phone and do a number of readings, few articles, whatever is happening in the news. I do, you know, go through like a pass on what's happening on Facebook, and I tend to Instagram account a little bit, and then come downstairs here and just start working away. And the project now developed certain creative strategies. Like I will show you one thing, for example, are these little cards. where I just write sometimes simple single words, like this is, outnumber, according to plan, how to something or other. Those are bits and pieces that, or like this one here, that has 2 words on it, end game and panic. Well, I just did a drawing with panic in it, so that one got crossed out, is used. This is for me to keep track of what I already ended up working with and what I still haven't done any work about. And these words are literally things that I kind of pick up as I'm reading the news stories or articles or whatever, things that stand out for me for whatever reason. And they're, odd phrases, but, self-defense, status quo, going nowhere.
I kind of like it. It's like you sit down with your coffee and you take in a bunch of information, but then you have this really quick sort of output that is on a micro scale.
The fact that this whole thing has to happen, the whole rotation has to happen in one day, is something I actually do enjoy quite a bit, because part of the procrastination process, of course, is that you don't finish anything. I have to finish this, otherwise
it's like the news cycle, right? They always
indeed,
say,
absolutely.
If you don't like the headline, give it a day.
Yeah, I almost mentioned something about news cycle when I was talking about the themes that evolved in the work, right? Stuff that it's kind of sustained over a long period of time, which is both a lot like what happens with the news cycle, but also totally unlike what happens in the news cycle, because in the news cycle, the new thing replaces the old thing, but I preserved it in that sequence already, right? So part of my agenda and my thinking about this project is to really record. I have a phrase in my studio, I don't know where that came from, but it's like on this board in the back there that says, to record is to serve. I have no clue where that came from, what that means, but it meant something to me then. And I'm reminded of this as I'm working on this project and engaging in all these conversations surrounding it. So.
Well, this meeting is being recorded.
Exactly.
Well,
thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you for your service. Exactly. I have one question from Jenna. Her mic is broken. She says, do you see using your work to speak to solutions in our world? I'm assuming she's asking if you see that as the function of some of the work, proposed solutions, or just reporting what you witness, which she said record, similar phrasing. She says your tone is mostly very dark. However, the protest posters are very uplifting. So I guess speaking to sort of those competing
good
tones.
observations. It's complicated. I'm not sure how to answer. There are actually multiple questions in there. So I guess first and foremost, I will say, okay, so the phrase that I'm working on, today's drawing, today's report, has the phrase that says, we forget everything. And I really think we do. Both individually, but also, and maybe especially so, as a society, as a culture, humanity. And part of the service in this, part of that value in just recording, responding to what happens, recording, is so that we don't. I hope it's not hokey, but I'm going to read you a little something that I actually, as I was putting the images together, actually, not true. I was reminded of this quote this morning when I was working on the current drawing. And this is a very, very short quote from a book called One Man's Bible. This is by Gao Xinjiang, who writes about cultural revolution in China. I read like 1 billion books about cultural revolution in China. It's sort of talk about extreme historical phenomena. It's incredible, and in so many ways, I feel explaining to us things that are happening today in this country. So this quote from him says, "It is very likely that when people have forgotten about it, it will make a comeback. And people who have never gone crazy will go crazy. And people who have never been oppressed will oppress or be oppressed. This is because madness has existed since the birth of humanity, and it is simply a question of when it will flare up again." I found this quote. This whole book is amazing. This is sort of like a flurry of these journals that suddenly people were able to publish in China about Cultural Revolution. Just a insane experience. That's why he's talking about madness, it as a madness.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I cannot read this and not think that this describes our situation to the T. I mean, this is exactly where we are right now. And so much of these amazing historical echoes are taking place. I mean, this is why people are talking about Hitler, Nazis, Stalin, whatever.
Well, I guess to speak to that, we had one more question, and we'll try to wrap it up. People are asking, do you find yourself having to limit the amount of time you spend on news and social media and all of this sort of information that's coming in to not feel burnt out? And so I think that also speaks to the question of what you just read, which is like, okay, if this is an inevitable madness, like why do we fight it, or why do we, like, if it's going to happen inevitably, why don't we give up? Like, how do you not get burnt out doing this?
Yeah, there's probably, well, the burnout thing, yeah, that's I don't know what to say about that, except for the fact that it's true. There's days where I'm not really sure what to do, but I mean, I in my intro, I guess you did say that I was from Poland, and I will say that so I was born and raised in Poland, and I grew up in a very complicated social political system, but I also witnessed solidarity, and I witnessed the end of communist rule in Poland, and to this day, I know I will never experience the same thing because it was absolutely singular. When people talk about the feeling of freedom on a kind of larger scale, I know what that feels like because it happened there. There was a distinct wave of a true sort of emotional immersion in that moment. So both of those experiences, I think, really are defining maybe how I see myself as an artist, and I mentioned earlier a sense of responsibility. I think that is part of my my upbringing in those experiences. I, as an art teacher, try to emphasize the importance of that with my students. I talk about this all the time, probably too much, and especially in today's reality. One thing I'll tell you is, like, burnout with the news is one thing, but I cannot not do it. There's a awesome quote. I think it was from some early Soviet artist who said, "Fear of handling shit is a luxury a sewerman cannot afford."
So we are sewermen then.
I speak for myself. I don't know about you guys, but this is, it's a load of crap. But we got to handle this. There's no question about this. Otherwise, if you just leave these things be, things are only going to get worse. The looting, and I don't mean the looting in the city. I mean the looting by the 1% will continue. The flat out thievery and disregard for human life will continue. It's not going to improve, because if there is any lesson for them, is that they can do all this shit. And they're untouchable, basically. So this election, again, I'm sorry to be on this soapbox, but there is a pivotal moment there, and I think for our country, a massive decision will have to be made at that point, and it's coming very, very soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think we'll probably end it on that, which is yeah, we have to show up. Well, again,
actually, can I say one more thing though? Because the fact that I can't vote also motivates me to work harder. Because,
well, and the fact that you saw that change take place in your own country, like
exactly. So I know that it's possible, but I also feel that I need to be able to say to myself, I have done my bit. I worked my ass off and did everything I can to move things forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your service, Peter. And yeah, hopefully, once everything opens back up again.
Feel free to reach out to me via Instagram. I really try to keep up with the conversations with everybody. So if you message me through Instagram, I will write you back.
All right, everybody, submit your questions via Instagram. Remember, it's Labor Camp.
That's right.
All right, awesome, Peter. Well, you have a wonderful day, and good luck with finishing your drawing.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Claps and jabs hands for Peter. And those of you that are in art form, I did create the reading discussion tab via our class portal, so that you'll be clicking on the Zoom icon and it should take you right there for 2 o'clock, the discussion. So look forward to talking about rituals with you guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. So Emily, is anything else we need to do, or should I be logging out here?
You can log out. We're good.
All right. Thanks again.
Bye, Peter.
Bye.